Good morning. I'm Kevin Freeman. Today is October 1st, 2024. I am heading over to a Freeman cemetery off Logging Road, where I intend to do a little maintenance on the headstone of Nathaniel Freeman. Nathaniel lived up here on Logging Road, about a third of a mile up, maybe half a mile up from Route 1, in the old farmhouse with a pond in front of it. And this cemetery is behind that farmhouse, so you'd have a difficult time navigating the alder bushes and the rosa flora and a lot of other scrubby undergrowth. So I'm taking this old skidder road. I'm up Logging Road about almost a mile, I think, just a little less than a mile. On the left you can see a skidder yard, and I'm going in through that way. So off we go. So a few years ago, this property was logged. At the time, I asked the logger if they could come in here and remove these trees from the cemetery plot, and they did, and I am very grateful for that. Yeah, so there's something so permanent about a stone wall in the landscape, and when you have a connection to it, I think it's even more so. And you can see these stones along the perimeter here. Of this cemetery. And you can see where they put the pointy side up with the head pointing sides. And I believe that was probably to keep the cattle from going in. So for me, there's something additionally compelling and alluring to knowing that my ancestors were out here piling up these stones for agricultural purposes and to protect their beloved ones. Here is the stone we're going to take a look at today. On this side, you can see an inscription, and it says, "In memory of Deacon Nathaniel Freeman, who died April 25th, 1834, aged," and it looks like the stone carver did a typo. I have decided that I would try using some D2 solution to see if I can remove the lichen and algae from this stone. This product has been used in graveyards, including the Arlington Cemetery, according to the D2 website. So it's very non-invasive. It creates a balanced pH. It doesn't have any bleach, and it's particularly good for marble, but we're going to try it here on this slate headstone. So already it's looking pretty good. I'm going to come back out in maybe a week or 2 weeks and check it out and see if it's more clean, and if it's not, I'm going to give it another application of that D2 product, and we'll see if we can make it look real spiffy. I do want to say that I believe it is likely, though there is no evidence in the cemetery, that John Freeman, Nathaniel Freeman's brother, was also likely buried here, as they co-owned the house, and you'll see the deed for that ownership in an upcoming clip. Good morning. It is October 6, 2024. Not quite a week since I put the first application of the D2 on Nathaniel Freeman's slate headstone, but today is Sunday, and the crossbow hunters and bow hunters are out during the week, so I figured this would be a good day to come back, check out the first application, and likely add a second application. So I'm almost there. Just up the hill, around the corner we'll find the cemetery. Okay, so here we are. This is the side that's in the shade right now. I think that when I came up last time, the blue part at the bottom of the stone that you can see where the date is was bluish color like this. And the brown tan color didn't occur until we got above the surface. So there doesn't seem to be that much of a difference between today and about a week ago. Let's go over to the other side and see what that looks like. This is pretty much the same thing. You see a lot of growth here still with the first application. And down below, I did clear some of the fill in around the headstone. I moved it away. And that's a blue similar to what we see on the other side. So it appears to be what was underground for years and years and years, sort of retained its original coloration, and just above the surface it's changed. So in the first application, the stone doesn't look restored or new or like it did the day that Nathaniel was buried out here, I'm sure. So there's still a lot of residue, a lot of growth on it. On the back of the bottle it says to keep reapplying over time. So I'm just going to be patient, and I will use up the entire bottle if necessary. And hopefully we'll have a really nice looking stone when we're finished. So stay tuned. I am back again. It's another day. In fact, it is October 20th, 2024. Closing right in on hunting season. And so I prefer to come out here on Sundays. There is bow hunting currently, and there isn't a lot of difference as far as I'm concerned for stimulating a hunter to take what we used to refer to as sound shots. When I was growing up and hunting with my father, we would occasionally meet hunters in the woods and ask if they'd seen anything. And more than once people would say, no, but we took a couple of sound shots. That's always stayed in my memory. I've always been somewhat apprehensive of finding people like that in the woods. So anyways, I'm out here today. This is my third trip out to the Freeman cemetery. So here we are. It's almost a perfect fall day. I bet the temperature's about 70. Bright sun. A lot of the foliage is falling off the trees, but there is still some very beautiful scenes. So here we are now. We're coming up on the headstone of Nathaniel. This is the back side of the headstone. Nathaniel Freeman married Hannah Foster. Hannah Foster was descended from Governor Simon Bradstreet of Massachusetts. Presumably, Hannah is buried here beside Nathaniel. Unfortunately, there is no headstone to indicate that. This is how I'll be leaving the stone after the third application. It definitely looks like it's going to need a fourth. Well, wasn't entirely clean. I thought maybe 2 applications would do it. So that third application, I'll come back next week and perhaps apply another one. And I'm also going to come back in the later part of the day when the sun will be shining on the headstone so we can see more detail. Well, I'm back. Today is November 3rd, and it is the second day of hunting season in Maine, and it's a Sunday. So I have my orange on, and I'll just elaborate just a little bit. Why that we grew up wearing orange in November is because there are these tales, and they're just tales, but we used to hear of people shooting deer on Sunday and tagging them on Monday morning. So I don't know if they were true, but I also would hear gunshots all through the day on Sundays in November. Could have been people out resighting their rifles. I don't know. But we could hear the shots. We were told that Monday mornings was always the busiest at the tagging station. So I've always been a bit cautious, maybe a little overly cautious, but it doesn't take that much to put on a blaze orange hat or a sweatshirt or whatever you have and protect yourself. So that's what I've done today. Today I've come out a little bit later in the day, hoping that the sun will be shining on Nathaniel Freeman's headstone. The cemetery is just up over this knoll. We'll be there in just a minute. Okay, well, I thought I might come out here and find the stone completely clean, but that didn't happen. So I'm just going to take a real soft brush and abrade the surface of the stone a little bit and see if I can provoke some of this stuff to fall off. Okay, so this little brush is agitating the organic stuff just enough to release a good amount of it. I'm not going to try to do the whole thing again. I think I'll come back. I'll let this soak again. I think is what I'll do is I'll grab an apple and maybe wait for the sun to come around, and then we can see a much clearer view of the stone than we've been able to see in the past. I think that sun's going to come around, but you can see, it's hard to see really. Oh, there we go. So this is after 2 good soakings and a subsequent soaking and agitation with the brush. I do have a theory about what happened to the stones in this cemetery. Now, there are several rough field stones placed in the cemetery that seem to have shafts on one side or the other. And so I'm assuming that those are humans that were buried here. And I'm assuming that they were not necessarily free people. And I have nothing to substantiate that. But I do have a list of a lady who came here in the 1950s, I think. And she wrote down the inscriptions on the stones, and I'm going to post the inscriptions now. And all of those stones are not here except for the one, which is the one that we've been cleaning, Nathaniel Freeman's. And not very far from where I sit is a pond, and when I was growing up, the pond had a dam on one end of it. And it'd been taken over by beaver, actually, and as kids we'd go down and we'd try to see if we could dig into the beaver burrows, and we had no luck, but we realized that beneath the beaver dam was a concrete and stone dam. And so it made a pond, and a lot of the kids before my generation, I was born in 1960, have mentioned that they came out to this pond and they ice skated a lot. It was kind of a neighborhood thing. And in my imagination, which, you know, is totally unsubstantiated, I could see some kids coming up here and picking up some stones and seeing if they could break them through the ice when they're out here skating. Of course, I don't know any names. And it's only conjecture, but the mill pond is so close. And I've scoured the woods otherwise. And, you know, I could absolutely have missed 4 or 5 stones, but it seems unlikely. But I can't get access in the pond. I've tried walking in there with mud boots on, but it's just too mucky. And I poked around with a pole and tried to see if I could hit a stone or something, but it's too large of an expanse, and I'm unable to do it. And I don't know if it freezes up some winter. I don't know if I could get somebody with ground penetrating radar to come out here, and if ground penetrating radar goes right through the ice or not. But that would be one way to tell. Otherwise, you know, this graveyard was just vandalized, and somebody must have hauled the stones off. It's hard to imagine where to. I've never heard or seen of any of the stones. Several of the neighborhood friends that I grew up with know that these stones aren't here. Anyways, sometime I would love to find those stones. Well, here we are, April 28th, 2025. It's been a whole winter since I filmed the cleaning of Nathaniel Freeman's headstone, and I'm interested to see what it looks like. I didn't bring any detergent with me today, but the sun, I hope, is just right, and it will be shining brightly on the headstone. I know that the way that the stone faces, it doesn't get direct sunlight until about at least mid-afternoon, depending on the time of year. So I hope I've picked a good day to come out here and take a look and see what's happened. There isn't really a lot of written information on John Freeman, my 5th great-grandfather. But I have found he was a Revolutionary War soldier, and he went to Valley Forge, and he was probably at Fort Ticonderoga. And there are a couple of deeds that reference his name, but really not a lot. And I think when he was 82, he petitioned the government for some money to help take care of him. He said he was a laborer. He and his wife, kind of tricky right here. I gotta be careful I don't fall into this beautiful little stream right here. Yeah. So here we go. Well, looks like we got across safely. I'm not wet. Pretty pleased about that. So John's and Nathaniel's father and mother, Mary Perkins Freeman, moved up to Castine in the mid to early part of the 18th century and lived out their lives up there, and from what I've read were buried up there. So Nathaniel and John by evidence of the deed, came to York, or came back to York. Maybe they felt, who knows, maybe their family felt connected to York and their extended family was still here, and for whatever reason, York appealed to them more than Castine did, and they both came back here and made a life for themselves. So that's kind of interesting that I didn't know that until a few months ago, the connection to Castine and Nathaniel Freeman. But I'd always wondered about the Perkins family in Castine. The Perkins were my grandmother's family. And I always was curious about how that they got up there, what compelled them to go up there, and how that they managed their family in both places. Okay, so we've arrived at the Freeman plot. And let's see if the headstone is still here. Up there it is, around the corner of that stump right there. That's the backside. So let's go check it out and see if the sun is shining in a way that will be conducive for optimal viewing. And there is the sun right up there. It's looking pretty good. Let's see. Up, up, up. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Wow, that's much better. Very nice. Wow. Okay. This is awesome. Almost completely clean. Almost being the key word. There's our urn and willow. We can see detail here that I've never seen before. Wow, wow. Wow, I'm really happy that I came out here and did this. Sweet. Yeah. I have brought a very soft, very fine scrub brush. Very soft. So, I'm just going to hit a few of these spots here, see what happens. You know, that could be bird poop. I don't know what that is. A little bit up here also. Wow. I think that's all I want to do. I brought a little trowel. I don't like the way that the water collects in here, so I thought I'd make a little trough just coming down the side here so it can drain around the stone. Every time I've come out here, the leaves gather in this little trough right here. Okay. Now, what I decided to do was, years ago, somebody gifted me an old stone rubbing kit, it's called. So, I have never tried this on a headstone before, and I know there's some controversy about that we shouldn't do it because it will erode the stone. further than the natural elements would, but you know, this stone is so remote and all the other stones are gone that I decided I was just going to do it and hope for the best. We'll take one sheet. It seems to be very generous in size. I'll just roll up this other one. Okay, included in the kit was some tape. Like I said, I've never done this before, so this is probably going to be a slight learning curve. No doubt. So I think is what I'll do. The first thing is I'll reduce this page down to something that's more manageable. There's two colors. I assume they're just different pigment and not different densities of whatever this material is. Some sort of pigment. And I think this is as easy as just rubbing. So I'm going to give it a try. That tape is not being cooperative, is it? You can see where somebody made a typo on the headstone. I didn't know the date. I would think it was... Well, I don't know what I would think. I love coming out here in these woods. I grew up out here, spending time in the afternoon with friends, playing cops and robbers of Army. Army was a big one, and so was cowboys and Indians. And then we all got a little bit older, and our parents allowed us to come out here with firearms and become hunters. My dad instructed me on how to use a firearm. He was an instructor. I think it was on the M1 in the Korean conflict. He was a good shot, so somebody evidently recognized that, and he became an instructor. And when I got my first gun, he was my instructor. And then we went into the woods together and we hunted. But I think most of all, my dad and I shared an appreciation of being in the woods. And at some point, we decided that we didn't need to shoot an animal to appreciate the woods. I did shoot 2 deer. Opening day, I think I was 14. I think it was the first year I had my hunting license. And then one ran out in front of me on the power line around 7 a.m. and I put it in my sights and pulled the trigger and shot him right through the heart. We went to the tagging station and then we returned to the same place, and my father said, "Hey, Kev, you go down there and I'll stay up here." And I went over this little hill, and about 200 yards away there was a deer. It was on a power line, which is on land that I currently own. And I didn't really know how small the deer was. It was a long ways away. I had a 30-30 Winchester with open sights, lever action. Put the gun up, sighted the deer in, squeezed the trigger, and I saw the deer flinch. Started walking over toward it, and I could hear this blatting coming from the woods, and I didn't know what that was. I thought it might have been a hunter mocking me, something that I would have probably done to one of my friends. But I followed the sound, and I got into the woods, and it was a small deer. It's about 75 or 80 pounds, I'm guessing. And the bullet had entered through its abdomen. And when it exited, it made a large hole, and all of its intestines had fallen out the hole. And the deer was in a great amount of pain, and it was probably bleeding or blatting for its mom, and I really didn't know what to do. I wasn't prepared to see something like that. So I raised my gun, put it as close to the deer's brain as I could, having no idea what I was doing. And I pulled the hammer back and I squeezed the trigger, and kaboom. I closed my eyes, and when I opened my eyes, I realized that I'd raised the gun when I pulled the trigger, and the deer was still alive. It was still bleeding for its mom. And then I realized that I couldn't lift the gun when I squeezed the trigger next time. And I did it, and that was the end of that. That was the end of me being a carnivore. I thought at that time, that was one of the most dreadful experiences I had in my life up until that point. And if I took no pleasure in that, but I was going to go consume that little guy, it really wasn't for me. And then I applied that to the bigger picture, like where does all this meat come from? Slaughterhouses, and I wasn't a proponent of that if I wasn't going to be there to actually take responsibility for the killing of my own food or meat. So after a very short while, probably a few months, I decided that I would become a vegetarian. And that's meant different things over my life, but it's definitely meant that I have not eaten any kind of meat from a mammal. I do eat fish, and I love fish. And to tell you the truth, I loved eating steaks when I was a kid that my mom would cook, and my father would require her to burn them, blacken them. He didn't like them tender on the inside. He didn't like them raw. He liked them well cooked. So they'd be a dark gray, and then the outside would be black. But I still liked them. That's my story. I'm sticking with it.